So you just mentioned security and reminded me of something. There's a way to share your SharePoint sites, obviously, with
Mm.
people externally.
Yep.
And maybe I need a cybersecurity person here. When I mention that you can do this, it seems like the cybersecurity people get their panties in a bunch over the fact that you are exposing your environment to external folks. I totally get why that's of concern
What's the
of our sites.
context?
You said what's the context?
Well, yeah. What's the context?
It was content that I put out, and then multiple IT professionals, when I put stuff like that out, they seem to get bothered.
But you can't legislate for that. It's just one of those things that there's certain, like, I make content about Copilot, and there are some people that just will not have it that Copilot is useful to anyone. They just can't be
Yeah, and
convinced. They've decided.
I don't know if I put them in that boat, because I'm like, if you're just some random person, that's one thing. But if you're in IT, that's it. Okay, all right. Maybe I shouldn't start my content with, "Hey, do you want to circumvent IT?"
Is that what you
Because
started with?
do that. I did.
Well, that's what you did. You're like, it's like
But
red rag
wait.
to a bull, isn't it?
Yes,
You
yes,
just like
yes.
set them. I mean, but I think that's interesting. I've seen quite a big creator recently who has been making content around this is how you don't get discovered using AI. And I don't know whether you've seen any of this,
No,
or
I have not. I haven't seen that.
and it's like, oh, these are the top 5 tells that you're using Chat GPT. And
Oh,
it's a Microsoft 365 creator, and I'm kind of like, I don't know about the tone of this. Like,
yeah.
I would prefer, there's a discussion around, well, what is the AI that your company has chosen, and this is the reason that you might use it. And if you're using that, that's great, and if you're choosing to use something different, then that's a problem. And I think I would say the same about SharePoint as well. Like, there are lots of capabilities in SharePoint, and are you using them collaboratively, like as part of what your organization is trying to achieve, or are you using them kind of in spite of and despite the controls that your IT team is trying to put in place? It's kind of the same thing if your facilities team says you can't exit through that door because it's a fire exit and it doesn't lock properly. We have a process for locking it, and then you keep walking out that door. At some point, someone's going to come and have a conversation with you because you are not acting as a good citizen within your community there, essentially.
Right.
And I think the same is true for SharePoint or anything within Microsoft 365. If you're pushing the boundaries of what's there and it's out of kind of interest and I want to get the most done that I can and there's stuff that I want to achieve and I don't know how to do it, I'm exploring, then that's one thing. But if you're purposefully doing an end run around your IT department after someone has explained that they don't want to do that, but maybe it's not, they don't have the skills to lock it down or whatever the case may be, I think those two things are entirely different. So I do think there's a fine line where showing people the power of what can be done versus
Yes.
encouraging people to kind of be like, well, the people who make rules within your organization about this must be kind of stupid, so you should do it in the way that you choose. And on that, I think this is a really interesting. This is a really interesting point. It just made me think of something, right? So the whole like co-work thing that's been going on. Like this week, we've had
Yes.
co-work
Yep.
that has become billable, and I was really interested by the fact that all those organisations that set up their spending policies, they suddenly got a banner from Microsoft saying something like, access to this is going to stop on the 30th of June and you need to set up a spending policy, request access. And whether your IT team had set up a spending policy or not, so far as I'm aware, you still saw this. And it's the same
Mhm.
type of thing. It's like we all have to work together and be collaborative and be respectful of the work that other people are doing. And whether that's you're a content creator and you're why an IT team might not want you to use certain AIs, and you still decide to make content that says this is how you get around people knowing that you used AI, or you start off your video, sorry to pick on you, Therman, with this is how you do this without your IT department, or Microsoft putting out banners that effectively say, hey, your IT team is incompetent and they don't know that you're going to be locked out of this. Why don't you request access? Even though they've done their job. All of those things fall into the same bucket, and they're a big problem. I think in the way that we communicate about these things, we set people up to clash with one another, and to think it's kind of a battle to get your way. But ultimately, all this stuff is collaborative, and when it comes to stuff like security and compliance, and ultimately just doing stuff that's good for the business, surely we have to encourage people to work together in the most effective way to get that done. Maybe I'm just being kind of utopian and silly, but
no. I don't think that you are. Here's what multiple things are in play, right? I completely forgot that I said that, but I just remembered as I was talking now. At the beginning of that video, I said, here's how you circumvent IT. But that came from another video where I showed people how to do something, and then the person goes, or multiple people go, oh, we can't do that in our environment. And I'm like, wait, what? They took that away? So I was like, okay, here's what you do instead. And what I was showing them is every time that you create a Microsoft team, you automatically get a SharePoint site.
Yep.
So I'm like, and that you also create a Microsoft 365 group. So I'm like, what you want to do is create Microsoft Teams, because you have the ability to create teams. Create the team, and then when you get the automatic site with it, use the site. So I was like, your IT people don't know, which was also something else that I had to clean up, because I made a mistake of saying, I made it sound like if you can do something without IT knowing, which is not true. IT sees everything. But I was like, also in that same video, I threw in a little bit of my own feelings, and I was like, listen, I don't think that your IT department should lock these things down. What they should do is educate you on how to use them. And that still garnered the attention of IT folks who were like, not in the, they weren't supportive of me saying, use Microsoft Teams, then use the corresponding site. And then also, if it's allowed, you can use this as the external area to collaborate with your external folks. And again, like I said in the video, I don't think IT should lock it down. They should show you how to use it. But then multiple IT folks came in there and said, yeah, we turned that off. No one is allowed to create teams in our environment, which kind of blew my mind, because I was like, when I think about it, I could see why you would do that, because people are creating a bunch of teams and exposing a bunch of stuff and doing things that they don't know about. They don't know. It's like a lot of it I'll put on Microsoft. Microsoft will provide something, and then it almost like jumps over the IT people, because IT is just ITing every day. But a regular user might be using something and then see a new button that Microsoft just published and have no idea what it does, how it works. But they'll be like, ooh, I'll click on that because it sounds like it makes sense. And then they find out something that they can do before IT finds out about it. So IT doesn't even know that there's some new feature that just dropped that you can now do this, and it now exposes a bunch of information. So if I'm in IT, I get it. But if I'm in IT and I understand how these products work for Microsoft, I'm in a different category. And I'm one of those people who, I know how SharePoint works, and I've been to and interacted with many organizations where IT doesn't know how SharePoint works. They don't know what I know about SharePoint. So certain things I might say, I don't have like a IT person checking me to say, hey, you shouldn't show them how to do that, because then it means that they could do this. My rebuttal is always, well, show them how to use it, but they don't know how to show them how to use it because they don't know about SharePoint. So it's like
there's a lot of pieces of that to unpack, though, aren't there? I think the first one is what is turned on and what is turned off needs to respond to an actual risk profile, an understanding of like what are you giving up and what are you taking away? When you do that. And I don't think it's that you shouldn't ever do. I mean, things like locking down who can create a team. Well, Teams or SharePoint in their current form are designed to be self-service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we deal with that self-service stuff where, like group naming policies, expiration policies, access reviews, like all these kinds of tools that exist to help us manage the fact that we've got all of this stuff that's been created by users, that's kind of owned by them and managed by them, and we want IT to be able to be hands off while keeping in control of it. But I can completely understand that one way of dealing with that kind of might be just to turn stuff off and be like, okay, well, you're gonna ask before you need something. I don't think that's necessarily the wrong answer. It's not. It's not using all the capabilities that are there, but for a lot of organizations, if you don't really know how to do that kind of expiration naming policy, access, like all those things I just mentioned, then probably it's better for you just to lock it down than it is to allow hundreds of teams to be created unchecked. So I know even Microsoft has run into this issue with the sheer size of their tenant and trying to manage all the resources they've got available to them. So this is something that is a live problem for a lot of people. But then in terms of the enablement, like most of the time the job as kind of defined by organizations of their IT teams is not the day-to-day like enablement and betterment of what's going on in the environment. There is no process that's been built to take this kind of fire hose of feature updates that comes from Microsoft or from any of the other vendors and turn them into useful things that are then going to benefit the business, right? So we kind of leave employees, the team members, the team leaders, the supervisors in limbo. And a lot of the time what I see is how far people move forward really depends on their own interest and the interest of the supervisor or manager of that team rather than culturally across the organization. You see pockets of places where technology enablement is very important and pockets of places where people are still doing things in the way they were 15 years ago. And that is a problem, but I don't think to say it's the problem of the IT team or even the IT leaders is not necessarily that clear cut, because I think that role is defined differently in different organizations and the amount of latitude that they have to be forward looking is different in different contexts. So in some places the safest thing will be, okay, I don't want this fire hose because it's going to give me problems. And in the best, most technology enabled organizations, there's probably a different attitude, which is I want to understand what's being offered to me and I want to use it to get the best. But that's a completely different attitude, and it requires time, it requires training, it requires budget to be able to try things out, it requires a tolerance of failure and mistakes, and not all organizations have that right now.
Yeah, and the gap is filled with training. To me, that is your first line of defense is training, because whether you're talking about 2026 where people have access to something like SharePoint, which is a different animal. It's just a different animal because it allows you to do way more than you think you can. And it's now, like I always used to say, it went from, access and permissions to education. Because before, you couldn't get your hands on SharePoint. Somebody had to do the things for you, like people like me and other admins. Now it's an end user's tool like PowerPoint and Word. You could just have your fingers on it. And it's 2026 and you can do that, right? But before there was a SharePoint, way back in the days, you can still spill things. You can still take your organization's proprietary information, put it in an email, and send it somewhere. And send it to, a collaborator. The way you stop stuff like that is maybe on onboarding or every 3 months you're doing some type of training where you tell people don't do that. You know what I'm saying? You have to give a reminder to say you cannot take this information and email it out. You cannot write your password on a piece of paper and stick it under your keyboard, because then if I'm looking for to figure out how can I get in your computer when you're gone, first place I'm looking is under your keyboard. See if you got your thing written down. You know what I'm saying? And then people might think I came up with this idea on my own to just write this thing down and stick it under my keyboard. But repeated training can help combat that, because then it'll keep it top of mind and make people think, you know what? That's kind of crazy. I probably shouldn't do that. And I should change. If you force people, obviously when you have situations where you have the control to force people, I need you to create a strong password and I need you to do it every 3 months. Nobody's doing that unless you force them. You know what I'm saying? So the same thing with SharePoint. I could see IT departments saying, look, our organization is way too big. People don't know how to use Teams. They're just opening up Teams, not knowing they're creating a group, not knowing they're creating a site, not knowing they're exposing whatever they put inside of that team to the rest of the organization, not knowing that their chats are not secret. So they're in there talking shit about talking trash about the boss. They don't know none of that. So I'm just gonna lock it down. Maybe it's better when you have, a small organization or a mid-sized organization where it's a little bit easier to control and you say, yes, we can get the education out. But for a big organization, totally get it. A large organization can say, turn it off. Anybody needs anything, let them come to IT because we ain't got time to be dealing with cybersecurity issues. So I would never say don't turn it off. I feel bad for the employee who they turn the thing off in front of them and they don't even have, access to this thing that Microsoft gave them, which like Power Automate. They turn off Power Automate at various organizations,
Yeah.
which to me is like the super cool, super powerful tool that somebody inside of the organization can really get very good at that can help the organization, but it's just turned off.
But
I get it.
Well, yeah, but I think you're
Whatever.
looking at it from a purely technology point of view, and I think there's a broader perspective, which is that organisation actually giving the employees the tools they need to do the job? Like, if they are giving them the tools they need to do the job, then there isn't a need for everyone to be an entrepreneur and go off and build their own Power Automate flows, right? These things are designed to fill gaps. And if you've already filled the gaps, if you already have a plan to fill the gaps, if you're comfortable that, the expectations that you're putting on your team, they're able to meet with the tools that you've offered them, and so on and so forth, then maybe there isn't such a need for that. I think this kind of entrepreneurial, I'm going to go and build it myself view of what IT should all be about is for a world where everyone is asked to do more than they should be asked to do in a context where they're not given the resources to do it, right? And that's become our expectation around what the workplace looks like. It's kind of like a Hunger Games for creating a work output, right? And so is that what it should look like? Or should we be enabling people with, that they've got the resources, they've got the tools, they're able to sit down at their desk, they understand what the goals are, and they can get on and do it because that's been thought about. And I think ideally that's what we would like. And if people are turning these tools off because either they've provided that or they have a plan to provide it and they're working hard to implement it or adopt it and so on and so forth, then I don't see anything wrong with that. And that could be something across small, medium, or large organisations. It's just a matter of, is there a plan? Is there a reason? Or is it just a culture of saying no? Is it a culture of CYA? Like you could look at it and say, everyone understands if they send an email with an attachment that they're sending that file, and that's on them. But if I leave SharePoint turned on and they're not sure who they're sharing with, and then they upload a confidential file, that's on me. So the CYA IT approach is, well, I'm just going to turn it off because I don't want this on me, So there's lots of different reasons, and you have to get into what is the reason that's driving the picture that you see. And is that a good reason? Is it a reason that requires some, re-education around some of these things? And I don't think there's a right answer and a wrong answer. I can see a situation where everything is completely open, and it's that case for the wrong reasons. And I can see a situation where everything is completely shut down and closed down, and it's done that way for the right reasons. And it's our job as consultants going in and working with organisations to understand which of those pictures we're seeing, because that should influence the advice that we give.
Yeah, I agree, but you got to look at a company like Microsoft, right? Microsoft does things where it like they'll put things in your hand, and they're not just putting it in the company's hand, they're putting it in the individual employees' hands. And then it's up to the right people to keep up with what Microsoft is doing and then educate people on how to use it. Because you got a tool, like you can provide a tool to somebody and the tool only does what the tool does. That's it. It just does what it does because that's how it was developed. Like QuickBooks. I think I'm not a heavy QuickBooks user, but I believe QuickBooks is just you use what they give you. That's it.
Oh, the QuickBooks
Microsoft.
is we change it every week, and there's useless AI everywhere. So yeah.
Okay. But it's coming from QuickBooks. The thing that Microsoft did since way back is let the users get involved. So if you think back to, I don't know, Access, when an end user could have access to a database, when you think about that, why does an end user need access to a database? It's like the IT folks should be the people who are managing databases, but they gave access to end users to have access to these databases, and then they were able to build these full-blown applications on them. So then it's like, do we want tools like that in the marketplace? At this point, the question is not, it doesn't matter anymore because Microsoft is a $1 trillion company. They're in everywhere. And ever since they've been making tools like that where an end user could really go crazy with it. Even if you think about spreadsheets, you could create, your macros and dashboards and all these things inside of Excel as a regular end user, as opposed to if you're given some other kind of tool, you won't have all that ability to do that. You just do what the tool allows you to do. But Microsoft traditionally has done that. And SharePoint is one of the biggest examples because SharePoint, there was a time where you just worked on SharePoint. You did what the admins of SharePoint allowed you to do. Now, they took that, like I was mentioning earlier, and made it so that anybody could go in there, see what you can do, and then build full-blown applications on there. I support that industry because I teach people how to do it. So I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying this is the world that we are in with Microsoft being the big company that they are and doing things the way that they do. This is something you have to account for. You have to account for the fact that Microsoft will place things in your end users' hands, and then you have to do the education or turn things off or both. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, be strategic about your approach with how Microsoft provides these things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time it's the wrong way round as well. And I've commented on this time and again that something's turned up and it's on by default, and it shouldn't be. These new things, when they arrive, it should be an option to turn them on. Now, I understand why it's done, and that is that it's fighting against the inertia of, well, we understand how our organisation works, how our environment works, and we're not going to turn anything new on because it's a risk to us to do it. It's that same pattern that we just were discussing. So I understand it. And that goes to the root of this tension that exists, the tension that we create between users and IT teams and the vendors that are in the middle of it. And the right answer is to shift the culture around IT in a lot of organisations. Like that's how you end up remediating that. And maybe there's a shift of culture within organisations like Microsoft as well, in terms of are they selling capabilities to the end users, or are they selling capabilities to the IT teams? And I think that's a problem as well. But I understand why that tension exists, because in a lot of organisations I work with, I work with some IT teams that are fantastic, and are forward-looking and want to do the best for everyone within their organisation. They see themselves as enablers. But I work with other IT teams that are very much anchors. They are the thing that is holding that organisation back. They are the ones that are saying no. They are the ones that are defaulting to, this is the way that we do it because it's the way we've always done it. And because of the sheer volume of stuff they need to keep up with, they're not keeping up, And so I see both of those patterns. You have to work with both of those patterns very differently. You can get stuff done in both of those contexts, but sometimes my job with an organisation is to help them put their foot on the gas. Sometimes my job is to help them put their foot on the brake. because you've got tech people that are rushing ahead of what the users could actually get on board with and adopt. So both of those scenarios exist as well. So I don't think there's one answer, but I do think coming back to this idea of can we have a bit more harmony? When we're not
Yeah.
setting people up against one another and we're trying to we all understand that some of this tech stuff is good for us, some of it's bad for us. We're all just trying to get by, and come from that point of view at it, and go and sit in a circle and hum a song and so on and so forth. Maybe. I don't know what's going on with me today. Maybe it's because it's we're coming up on a holiday. Maybe I'm just feeling a bit different to normal. But I'm just like, why do we have to be so confrontational about all this stuff?
Yeah, I'm with you. My goal is to never be confrontational. I think that's kind of cheesy. But I know that I know that when I put out certain kind of content, not even certain kind, just that one piece and maybe another one, it's the way I do the content is like if I would be talking to you in person. You know what I'm saying? So I would have used those words. I would have said the same thing and been like, circumvent, and I would have still said, IT, you need to educate your folks. But one thing I want to go back to real quick. You said I was looking at it from a technical only point of view, and I think you're right because there's another piece where there's a human involved and there's politics involved, which I always like to talk about, and there are things that need to be considered. So, like, if you think about the person who runs the IT department that came from maybe another organization where they got burned, you know what I mean? They got burned bad because somebody somewhere screwed something up and it fell in their lap. It fell in that IT's person lap, and they told themselves, personally, never doing that again. I'm not allowing that to happen again because that was on me. And you could have that personality, which makes you going forward, you turn things off before you turn things on. You default to turn it off. And it's like, I could talk about this from a technical point of view, but they can respond to me from a personal point of view and say, yeah, well, this happened and I have no way to control that except by doing this and turning it off. And there's a lot of people that live in CYA mode, and you can't blame them because if you think about it, that's their job. That's their livelihood. That's how they earn money. So they might be in the camp of, look, I love all of this stuff that's coming out and all these cool things we can do, but before we introduce that to the users, we're doing this. And their thought process could be rooted in fear, which, again, can't blame them because they might have came from an organization where something really bad happened or multiple things bad happened, and they're just like, if I was in charge, I would not let that go down. And then they were able to get in charge, and now they don't let that go down. So I'm glad you brought up the technical piece because I was just thinking, which I normally don't do, only think technically. I'm like, let's think about the people first. And yeah, there's real people running IT departments that are like, no, we're not doing that. So figure it out.
It all comes back to culture. All of this stuff comes back to culture, Therman. And,
yeah.
I think you can try to separate it off and be like, okay, well, we have our culture over here and we have our technology over here. And, but it doesn't work like that, and it's all part of the same thing. And, you need a culture where failure, is managed as opposed to failure being punished, right. Because we all fail sometimes. Where people pull together to get stuff right, even if something's gone wrong, like these kinds of things,
right.
You apply them differently because you're talking about something that's maybe in the IT space versus, operations or facilities or whatever it might be. But ultimately, it's the same kind of core human skill set that you need to be successful. And I think that's so important because very often people wanted to have a conversation, I'll start a conversation. They want to talk technology, and that makes sense. They're paying to talk about technology. That's the kind of headline. But below that, you need to understand the organization and how it works, what drives it, what drives the people, what they're concerned about. To be able to do a good job, whether it comes to implementing something or what you turn on and off or training or whatever it might be. All of those things come down to culture and understanding the culture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will throw strategy in there too, but you're I can't remember. I was talking to I had somebody on my podcast and I can't remember if we said or if she was saying that your culture drives your strategy or if your strategy drives your culture. She was a strategy person, so I'm gonna
Mm.
guess that she said your strategy drives your culture. Which I could see because you could intentionally say, well, the strategy here is X, Y, and Z, and then that informs how your culture operates. So I get it if we go strategy to culture. But hopefully a business owner or leadership in business heard this and understood where we were coming from and realized that to Nick's point, to your point, Nick, it's not about, uh pitting each other against pitting ourselves against each other, but figuring out how we can work together to make things better. That sounds real, cliche and pie in the sky, but it's true. You know what I mean? Like my thought process is educate, 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 educate. In other words, training. You can't go wrong with that. It's just like, if the whole you're only as strong as your weakest link type situation. So if everybody comes into the organization and you have a powerful and active and well managed training program, you could really get your folks. Your organization will be better off for it. You can't go wrong. Is basically what I'm saying. But yeah, that's my 2 cents. You know what I'm saying, Nick, before we get out of here,
Yes.
um, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you and what you got going on?
Go and find me on LinkedIn.
Nice.
If you're interested in Copilot co-work and the billing around Copilot co-work, then I hosted a webinar on that last Wednesday. And I've got that recording up on. There's some links on LinkedIn. There's a link on my website. So if you're still interested in that being a live topic for you, then I've got that. And obviously subscribe on YouTube as well if you want to see videos from me. How
Sweet.
about you, Therman?
Well, Nick, before I go, I do want to make a quick announcement. You know what I'm saying? Nothing too crazy. But a couple days ago, I did get the news that I am a Microsoft MVP now. You know what I mean? And it was very humbling, surprising because as much as I do, I still don't feel like, I'm worthy. Um, but I do feel like people find what I do helpful. I get that feedback all the time. So that really does do it for me. That fills my cup up. Matter of fact, yesterday, somebody from somebody in New Zealand hit me and was like, hey, I'm here just watching your videos in New Zealand. I'm finding them very helpful. Thanks so much. I don't care how connected we all get and how we, become a global economy. It still blows my mind that somebody is all the way in New Zealand sitting there connected to the internet and finding what I do helpful enough that they're consuming it and putting it into practice. That does it for me. You know what I'm saying? Like that's still mind blowing to me. I don't care how far we get into this internet world, but because of stuff like that, then I got recognized because I've been doing this for a few years now. I got recognized by Ami Diamond, friend of the show. He nominated me, and then I had to put an application. And then I just found out a couple days ago that I got accepted to the program. So I'll be talking a little bit of trash about Microsoft, but shout out to Microsoft. You know what I'm saying? I won't stop. I'm gonna keep it real with how I feel about things that Microsoft does, but I am humbled and super thankful for the recognition. And after going through the application process, it's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. So I'm happy to keep it up every year. And mainly at the core, what I do is just still producing content that people find helpful. Like that's what I'm going to continue to do no matter what. So excited about the next year and all the things that come along with being an MVP. So yeah, and Nick and all of your support, Nick. You know what I mean? I can't not mention that. We've had a lot of conversations, and you believed in it more than me that I was gonna get it. So I appreciate that. So yeah, just looking forward to continuing to produce content, helping people out, and showing off my fancy hardware. It'll go somewhere
Yeah,
on my
you're gonna have
bookcase.
to get one. You're gonna have to get one of those and stick it somewhere. You're gonna need to make some space for it.
Yeah, let me see. Where is yours back there? Yo, yeah, that one right there. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I gotta find some space up here for it, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, find me on, man, there was a time that I sat on this show and I said, hey, if you don't see me on LinkedIn every day, that means I'm dead. That has since ship has sailed because now I'm on TikTok every day. So I'm not dead. I'm very well and alive, but I'm still on LinkedIn every now and then, but more so on TikTok. What I will say is that if you want the latest thing from me is the SharePoint starter pack. The link for that will be in the description. If you want to know, is SharePoint good for your next use case? Because that's a question I get a lot. It'll be like, hey, can we use SharePoint for this? I have a basic understanding for you of how that works. If you're interested, it'll only cost you an email. You just, click the link and then you'll get it. It's a SharePoint starter pack. It's a couple pages that explains how to even approach SharePoint so that they can support you in your work. But that's it, Nick.
All right. Well, congratulations, Therman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I really much appreciate it. And I will see you in a couple weeks.
All right. See ya.